When I came home from the hospital, the first thing I noticed wasn't the pile of get-well cards on the kitchen counter or the wilting flowers on the dining table. It was the empty jewelry dish on my nightstand. My wedding ring, the one my grandmother had given me on my wedding day, was gone. At first, my brain tried to explain it away. Maybe I'd taken it off before the surgery and left it somewhere. Maybe the nurses had moved it. Maybe it had slipped under the bed. But as I stood there in my bedroom, the bed sheet still smelling faintly of antiseptic from the cleaning my mother-in-law insisted on doing for my own good, a cold knot began to form in my stomach. I had been in the hospital for a week. Complications after my pregnancy had knocked me down harder than I'd ever expected. I came home exhausted, stitched together, and still processing everything that had happened. The ring was more than gold and a diamond. It was my anchor. It had belonged to my grandmother, passed to my mother, and then to me. It was the first thing my husband, Daniel, had slid onto my finger when we said our vows. Losing it wasn't an option. Daniel? My voice was hoarse from days without much talking. He appeared in the doorway, phone still in his hand. You're awake. You need anything? Tea? Soup? My ring, I said. It's not in the dish. His eyes flicked to the nightstand and then away, too fast. Maybe you misplaced it before you went in. We'll check later. You need to rest. No. I put it there the night before I left. I remember. Where is it? He rubbed the back of his neck. Look, maybe Mom put it somewhere safe while you were gone. You know how she is about tidying up. That cold knot in my stomach tightened. His mother, Elaine, had been in and out of this house all week, bringing casseroles, reorganizing my kitchen drawers, freshening up the bedroom. And Elaine was not the kind of woman to touch something without having an opinion about it. I found her in the kitchen, unloading my dishwasher like she owned the place. Elaine, do you know where my wedding ring is? I asked. She didn't even look up. Your ring? She pulled a mug from the top rack and placed it neatly in the cabinet. Oh, I thought Daniel would have told you. My pulse spiked. Told me what? Finally, she looked at me, her expression so casual it almost felt rehearsed. I sold it. For a second, the words didn't make sense. You... What? You weren't wearing it. It was just sitting there collecting dust. And with you in the hospital, bills piling up. We have insurance. We're not behind on anything. I snapped, my voice breaking. That ring was mine. It was my grandmother's. Elaine shrugged like I'd just complained about a missing coffee mug. Sentimental value is one thing, dear, but you can't pay hospital invoices with sentiment. I stared at her, heart pounding in my ears. You had no right. Now, don't be dramatic. It wasn't worth much. Just a little extra cash for the household. Her lips curved into something between a smirk and a smile. You're welcome, by the way. I could feel my hands shaking. Not worth much. That ring had been appraised years ago for far more than most people's annual salary. But more than the money, it was the last tangible piece of my grandmother I had left. Daniel walked in then, his voice strained. Mom, maybe we should... Daniel, I cut in. Did you know? He hesitated for half a second. That half second told me everything. I thought she'd talk to you first, he said quietly. She didn't talk to me. She stole from me. Elaine bristled. Don't you dare use that word. It was for the good of the family. No, I thought, staring at her perfectly manicured nails, her gold bracelet catching the kitchen light. It was for you. I turned on my heel and went upstairs before the tears could spill over. My chest felt tight, my body still aching from the hospital stay, but my mind was already moving. If Elaine thought that ring wasn't worth much, she was in for a shock. And if she'd already sold it, I needed to find out where and to whom before it disappeared forever. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app, starting a list. Pawn shops, jewelers, anyone in town she might have gone to. Elaine had lived in this city her whole life. She knew people. She probably thought she could unload it quietly without anyone asking questions. But there was one thing she didn't know. That ring wasn't just a family heirloom. It was a rare antique from a limited series commissioned by a jeweler in the 1920s, with a unique engraving inside the band. Only a handful existed in the world, and I knew the exact person who had appraised it last time. If he saw it again, even for a second, he'd recognize it. Elaine had just made the worst mistake of her life, and I was going to make sure she realized it. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Elaine's smug expression as she said, "It wasn't worth much." Those words gnawed at me, keeping my pulse elevated long after the house went quiet. I kept thinking about my grandmother's hands, wrinkled and warm, slipping that ring onto my finger on my wedding day. This isn't just jewelry, sweetheart. It's our story. By sunrise, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I couldn't taste, scrolling through the websites of every jeweler and pawn shop in a 30-mile radius. If Elaine had sold the ring locally, there was a good chance it was still in someone's display case, waiting to be noticed. Daniel came downstairs looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. He sat across from me, his eyes on the table. "We should talk about last night." "There's nothing to talk about," I said flatly. "Your mother stole from me. That's it." "She thought..." "Stop! Don't tell me what she thought. Tell me what you thought." He shifted uncomfortably. "I thought maybe she was helping. With the medical bills, with the stress." "Helping? Daniel, do you have any idea what that ring is worth?" His brow furrowed. "A few hundred, maybe 1,000. I laughed, but it came out sharp, humorless. "Try 20 times that, at least. And that's not counting the history." The color drained from his face. "You're kidding." "I'm not. And your mother just tossed it into the wind like a yard sale trinket." He ran a hand through his hair, finally meeting my eyes. "Okay. What do you want me to do?" I slid a piece of paper across the table. My growing list of potential shops. "Start calling. Find out who's seen it. We can't waste time." Daniel glanced at the list, then sighed. "She's not going to like us snooping. She's not going to like a lot of things that are about to happen." By mid-morning, we'd struck out at 4 shops. No one had seen anything matching the description. A thin platinum band, old European-cut diamond, and the tiny engraving inside. "Forever in spring." It wasn't until the 5th call, to a jeweler named Hal who'd been in business for 40 years, that I felt the first flicker of hope. "Yeah, I saw something like that yesterday," he said. "Woman in her 60s, short blonde hair, red coat. Brought it in for an appraisal, but I told her I needed more time to research it. She said she'd be back in a few days." My grip on the phone tightened. "Did she leave a name?" "Jenkins or Johnson, something like that." "Jenkins, Elaine's maiden name." My chest felt like it might burst. "Hal, that ring is mine. She didn't have permission to sell it. Please, don't let her walk out with it." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "If she comes back, I'll call you. But you better have proof it's yours." "Oh, I do," I said, glancing at the worn velvet box still in my dresser, the one my grandmother had kept for decades, with the original jeweler's certificate tucked inside. Daniel was pale when I told him. "If she finds out we know..." "Good," I said. "Let her squirm." That afternoon, Elaine came by unannounced, as if nothing had happened. She was carrying a grocery bag filled with produce. "Thought you could use some fresh fruit," she said, setting it on the counter. I didn't touch the bag. "Where's my ring?" Her lips curved into that same infuriating smirk. "Sold, like I told you." "To who?" "A friend of a friend. Cash deal. It's gone, dear." I leaned against the counter, studying her. Funny, because a jeweler named Hal says otherwise. Her smirk faltered for the briefest second. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You brought it to him yesterday. He told me." Her eyes narrowed. "He had no right to tell you that. That's confidential." "What's confidential is the fact that you tried to pass off a rare antique as something not worth much. Do you know what that ring's value actually is?" For the first time since this started, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Something that looked a lot like fear. Daniel stepped forward. "Mom, if you didn't know the value, you should have asked us before doing anything. That ring is worth tens of thousands." Elaine's face went pale, then blotchy red. "That's ridiculous. It's just an old piece of jewelry." "An old piece that collectors would fight over?" I said. "And you sold it behind my back." She opened her mouth, closed it again, then grabbed her purse. "I don't have time for this drama. If you want it so badly, buy it back." And then she was gone, the door slamming behind her. I turned to Daniel. "We're not buying it back, we're taking it back." My phone buzzed then. It was Hal. "She's here now." "What do you want me to do?" My heart pounded. "Tell her the appraisal came in, and she's going to want to sit down before she hears the number." I didn't even bother grabbing a coat. The second I hung up with Hal, I was out the door, my stitches pulling uncomfortably as I hurried to the car. Daniel trailed behind me, muttering something about me needing to take it easy. But I was beyond hearing reason. The jewelry store was a small, old-fashioned place, wedged between a bakery and a dry cleaner. Its front window displaying a modest selection of engagement rings and vintage watches. The bell above the door jingled as we stepped inside. Elaine was standing at the glass counter, leaning in as Hal, a tall man in his 70s with silver hair and half-moon glasses, held my ring between tweezers. She turned when she heard the door, her expression instantly hardening. "Oh," she said flatly. "Of course." Hal looked between us, sensing the tension. "I was just about to explain the appraisal results to your mother?" "Mother-in-law," I corrected. Elaine's jaw tightened. "We don't need to involve her in this. The ring is mine now." "No, it's not," I said, stepping closer. "Hal, tell her what you found." He adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Well, after examining the craftsmanship, the diamonds cut, and the unique engraving, I reached out to a few colleagues who specialize in early 20th century jewelry. This piece is part of a limited commission from a Parisian jeweler in 1923. Only 12 were made, and as far as we know, fewer than 6 still exist." Elaine's smirk was back, but it was shaky now. "So, it's rare. That doesn't mean—" Hal held up a hand. "Based on current market trends and collector interest, I'd estimate its value at somewhere between $55,000 and $60,000. The color drained from her face. "You're lying." "I have no reason to," Hal said calmly. "I even had an offer from a private collector in New York who's willing to pay $65,000. For a moment, Elaine just stared at him, her lips parting slightly as though she couldn't quite form words. Then her eyes darted to me, and I saw the realization settling in. She had taken something priceless and, in her arrogance, nearly given it away for pennies. She swallowed hard. "I didn't know." "That's the problem," I said coldly. "You didn't know because you didn't care enough to ask." Hal set the ring on a velvet pad. Now, legally, I can't complete any sale without confirming rightful ownership. Do you have proof it's yours? I reached into my purse and pulled out the small velvet box, the original certificate inside. Hal took one look at the paperwork, nodded, and slid the ring toward me. Elaine's hand shot out, fingers closing over the band before I could take it. Wait, I'm the one who brought it here. That should count for something. I met her gaze, my voice like ice. What it counts for is proof you tried to sell stolen property. If I wanted, I could be on the phone with the police right now. Daniel stepped in between us. Mom, let go. Her grip loosened, and I snatched the ring back, my heart racing as the familiar weight settled into my palm. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. Hal cleared his throat. I'll make a copy of the appraisal for your records. And if I may, you might want to store it somewhere secure. A safe deposit box, perhaps. Already planning on it, I said. Elaine was silent as we left the store, her face pale and tight. I could almost see the gears turning in her head, calculating what she'd lost, not just in potential money, but in control. For years, she'd thrived on making me feel small, powerless. Today, she'd failed spectacularly. Back in the car, Daniel let out a long breath. Well, that was something. I turned the ring over in my hand, tracing the engraving with my thumb. We're not done. He glanced at me warily. What do you mean? I mean, she's been meddling in our lives for too long. This wasn't about money. It was about control. She thought she could take something that mattered to me, decide what happened to it, and face no consequences. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. What kind of consequences are we talking about? The kind that makes her think twice before pulling something like this again. When we pulled into our driveway, Elaine was already getting out of her car. She must have driven straight behind us. We need to talk, she said sharply. No, I said, unlocking my front door. We need space. She followed us inside anyway, her heels clicking against the hardwood. I made a mistake, all right? I admit that. But I was trying to help. We have bills. Stop pretending this was about bills, I said, turning to face her. You didn't do this for us. You did it because you wanted control. You wanted to make a decision for me without my input. And you thought you'd get away with it. Her mouth opened, then closed. For once, she didn't have a comeback. Daniel stepped forward, his voice quiet but firm. Mom, you need to leave. Right now. Elaine looked at him like she didn't recognize him. But after a long pause, she turned on her heel and walked out, slamming the door behind her. I slid the ring onto my finger, the metal warm from my palm. That's one battle won, I murmured. Now for the war. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the ring in front of me, the overhead light making the diamond throw sharp little flashes across the walls. Daniel was upstairs, trying to get some sleep. But I knew I wouldn't be closing my eyes anytime soon. My body was still healing, but my mind was on fire. Elaine had always been meddlesome. She had opinions about the way I dressed, the way I cooked, even how I arranged my living room furniture. But this had been something else entirely. She had crossed a line she could never uncross, and I couldn't let it slide. It wasn't about revenge for the sake of hurting her. It was about changing the rules. For years, she'd played the part of the matriarch who could do whatever she pleased, confident that no one, especially not her son, would stand up to her. If I didn't set a boundary now, she'd just find new ways to bulldoze me. The first step was information. I pulled out my laptop and started going through public records. Property deeds, tax filings, business licenses. Elaine liked to keep her life polished on the outside, but I wanted to know what the cracks looked like underneath. By midnight, I knew more about her finances than I think Daniel ever had. She wasn't in trouble, not yet. But she had some expensive habits, and some of them were hanging by a thread. Credit lines tied to her name, a small rental property that hadn't had a tenant in months. The kind of things she would not want brought up at Sunday dinner with the rest of the family. I wasn't going to blackmail her, not exactly. But I wanted leverage. Something to make her think twice before pulling another stunt. The next morning, I called my cousin, Megan. She's the one person in my family who can keep a secret and, more importantly, knows half the gossip in this town before it even happens. I told her, in broad strokes, what Elaine had done. There was a long pause on the other end before Megan said, "You want me to help spread the story?" "Not yet," I said, "but I want it ready. When the time comes, I want people to hear exactly how she tried to pawn off a family heirloom for pennies, and how she almost lost $60,000 because she didn't bother to ask a single question." Megan let out a low whistle. "She's going to hate you for this." "She already does," I said. "The difference is, now she's going to respect me too." That afternoon, Elaine showed up again. She didn't knock. She never knocked. I met her in the doorway, blocking her from stepping inside. "If you're here to apologize, you can say it from the porch." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't be ridiculous," I came to explain. "There's nothing you can explain that makes what you did okay." She tried to push past me, but I didn't move. For the first time, she seemed genuinely thrown off by my refusal to yield. "Daniel's my son," she said sharply. "I have a right to be involved in your lives. You have the right to be invited into our lives. You don't have the right to take what's mine, make decisions for me, and lie about it." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You think you're so clever now because you got your precious ring back. But you forget, family talks, people remember. You don't want to make me your enemy." I smiled then, but there was no warmth in it. "Elaine, you made yourself my enemy the second you decided my boundaries didn't matter. The only difference now is that I'm done playing nice." She blinked, clearly not used to me speaking to her like that. For a moment, I thought she might actually lash out physically, but instead she turned and walked briskly down the steps, muttering something under her breath. When the door closed, I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was working. She was unsettled. That evening, Daniel finally asked what my plan was. I told him only part of it, that I wanted her to know she couldn't walk all over me anymore. He looked uneasy, but didn't argue. "Just don't make it worse," he said. I slid the ring onto my finger, letting it catch the light. "It's already worse, Daniel. I'm just making sure it doesn't happen again." The next step was going to be delicate. I wasn't going to confront her directly again, not yet. I wanted the ground under her feet to feel unstable. I wanted her to realize that her control over the narrative was slipping. And the best way to do that was to take control of the story myself. The ring wasn't just back on my finger. It was about to become the sharpest weapon I'd ever wielded. I didn't start with the family. That would have been too obvious. Elaine would have gone straight to Daniel with accusations that I was turning people against her. No, this had to be slower, quieter. The way water seeps into the foundation of a house before anyone notices the cracks. I started with the people who adored gossip, but didn't owe Elaine loyalty. The cashier at the small grocery store where Elaine shopped every Tuesday. The receptionist at her hair salon. An old neighbor she ran into at the farmer's market. I didn't even have to lie. The truth was enough. How she'd taken my wedding ring while I was in the hospital, sold it without my permission, and then nearly lost a fortune because she hadn't bothered to check its value. The details were too juicy for anyone to keep to themselves. By the end of the week, I overheard two women whispering about the woman who almost gave away a $60,000 ring, while I stood in line at the post office. They didn't know who I was, and I didn't correct them. When I finally told Megan to go ahead and tell a few family members, she didn't hold back. "I just mentioned it to Aunt Carla and Cousin Ben," she told me with a grin, which, as you know, is basically the same as putting it on a billboard. Sure enough, by Sunday dinner, there was a shift in the air. Elaine arrived wearing her usual perfectly coordinated outfit, but I caught the way she scanned the table, eyes darting from face to face. People greeted her politely, but there was a stiffness, a distance. Halfway through the meal, Aunt Carla leaned over to me and whispered, "She really did that? Took your ring?" I kept my voice low, but just loud enough for the person on the other side to hear. "Yes, and she lied about its value. Hal the jeweler had to call me to stop the sale." Carla's eyebrows shot up. Unbelievable. From across the table, I saw Elaine's fork pause halfway to her mouth. She knew. She tried to steer the conversation towards safer topics, her volunteer work, a fundraiser she was organizing. But every so often, I caught someone glancing at her with that subtle mix of curiosity and judgment. The kind of look that says, "I know something about you, and I'm not sure I like it." After dinner, while people milled around the living room with coffee and dessert, Ben made a point of asking her about the ring, loudly. "So, Elaine, I heard you almost sold a small fortune without realizing it. That true?" The room went quiet for just a beat too long. Her laugh was brittle. "Oh, you know how stories get exaggerated." "Hal didn't seem to think it was exaggerated," Ben said, sipping his coffee. "He told me himself. Said he'd never seen a seller's face drain so fast when they heard the number." Elaine's cheeks flushed. "Well, mistakes happen. It was all sorted out." She glanced at me, the look in her eyes sharp as broken glass. I just smiled sweetly. "Yes. Thankfully, it's back where it belongs." I held up my hand so the ring caught the light, and more than one person leaned closer to admire it. When the evening wound down, Elaine left without saying goodbye to me. Daniel noticed but didn't comment, though he looked uneasy. 2 days later, Megan texted me. She's been calling around trying to find out who told the story. She's furious. Good. But I wasn't done. The gossip was just the surface-level damage. The real blow would be making her realize she no longer had the power to intimidate me or anyone else in this family. I had the leverage now, and I was going to use it. The next step would take more precision. A confrontation where I wouldn't raise my voice, wouldn't accuse, but would leave her with no doubt that I was in control. The kind of conversation that sticks like a splinter, impossible to forget. She'd taught me to play defense for years. Now I was teaching her what offense looked like. I didn't invite her over. She came on her own, just like she always did, pulling into our driveway without calling first. But this time, I was ready. Elaine stepped inside with a plastic container of soup, like she was playing the role of the caring mother-in-law. I could see the performance in her posture, the deliberate smile, the breezy tone. "I thought you could use something warm," she said, setting the container on the counter. I didn't touch it. "We need to talk." Her smile flickered. "About what?" "You know exactly what." I motioned toward the dining room table, and she sat down, folding her hands in front of her. I stayed standing for a moment, letting the silence stretch until she shifted uncomfortably. Then I sat opposite her, placing the ring on the table between us. She glanced at it, then at me. I told you, it was a mistake. I didn't know. You didn't care to know. I cut in, my voice calm. That's the difference. You decided you had the right to take something that wasn't yours, and you never even thought about asking me first. That's not a mistake, Elaine. That's a choice. Her jaw tightened. I was trying to help. Help who? You? Because that's the only person who benefited from what you did. And you're upset now, not because you regret it, but because people are talking about it. Her eyes narrowed. So you admit you've been spreading it around? I leaned back in my chair. I haven't told a single lie. Everything they know is the truth. You're embarrassed because your own actions embarrassed you. She shifted in her seat, clearly fighting the urge to argue. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. No, I'm making it exactly as big as it should be, I said quietly. You've been stepping over boundaries since the day I married Daniel. You've commented on my cooking, rearranged my home, interfered in decisions that weren't yours to make. I let it go for years. But this was the last time. Her eyes flashed, but I could see the uncertainty creeping in. And what? You think you can scare me into staying out of your way? I smiled faintly. I don't need to scare you. I just need you to understand that I'm not someone you can push anymore. The days where you make decisions for me without consequences are over. If you cross that line again, I will make sure the people you care about most know exactly who you are when no one's looking. The silence between us was heavy. I could see her processing, weighing whether to threaten me back or try to save face. Finally, she stood, grabbing her purse. You've changed, she said, her voice tight. No, I said, picking up the ring and slipping it onto my finger. I've just stopped pretending you haven't. She stared at me for a moment longer, then turned and walked to the door. Her footsteps were quicker than usual, like she couldn't get out of the house fast enough. I didn't watch her leave. Instead, I stayed at the table, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. This wasn't a total victory. Elaine wasn't the type to back down forever. But it was the first time she'd left a conversation with me without the last word. And that was the beginning of something new. Elaine didn't come by for almost a week. For her, that was unusual enough to be suspicious. She wasn't the type to retreat quietly, which meant she was plotting. Daniel noticed too. It's weird, he said one night while we were cleaning up after dinner. Usually by now she'd have called me at least twice to check in. I didn't answer. I knew better than to think silence meant surrender. With Elaine, it meant she was looking for a way to win the next round. Sure enough, on Friday afternoon, Megan called me. You're going to love this, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Elaine's been telling people you made up the whole ring story to make her look bad. Says you're bitter because you feel threatened by her relationship with Daniel. I almost laughed. It was such a predictable move. Shift the blame, question my credibility. Let her talk, I said. The truth doesn't need defending. But I wasn't going to just sit back. That weekend, Daniel's cousin's wife, Emily, hosted a barbecue. I wasn't sure if Elaine would be there, but I wore the ring, making sure it caught the sunlight every time I moved my hand. She showed up halfway through, carrying a dessert like she was walking onto a stage. The moment she spotted me, her smile tightened. Emily greeted her warmly, but didn't linger, which I noticed. Elaine might have been trying to control the narrative, but not everyone was buying it. An hour in, a group of us were standing near the patio when Ben, the same cousin who'd confronted her at dinner, asked loudly, So, Elaine, any more household treasures you're planning to sell without asking? The group chuckled, and Elaine's face flushed deep red. I see you've been listening to her version of the story, she said, tilting her head toward me. It's the only version I've heard, Ben said, sipping his drink. And it's pretty convincing when there's an actual appraisal involved. Her mouth opened, but before she could speak, Emily piped up. Wait, you mean the appraisal Hal did? I heard about that. That ring is stunning and worth a fortune. You're lucky she got it back. The conversation shifted then, with people asking me about the engraving, the history of the ring. I answered calmly, never raising my voice, never looking directly at Elaine. She stood there for a few minutes, clearly seething, then excused herself to the kitchen. Megan found me later and whispered, "You didn't even have to lift a finger. She's unraveling all on her own." But Elaine wasn't done trying. A few days later, Daniel came home looking frustrated. "Mom says you've been turning people against her. She's upset." "Good," I said, not even looking up from my laptop. "Good?" "Daniel, she tried to steal from me. She lied to you. She's only upset because she's losing control, not because she's sorry." He rubbed his temples. "I just don't want this to keep getting uglier." "It's going to get uglier," I said flatly, "because she's going to keep pushing until she understands I'm not going to bend. That's the only language she speaks." That evening, I got a call from Hal. "Thought you should know," he said. "Elaine stopped by today. Tried to clarify the story, said you'd given her the ring to sell. I told her I'd seen the certificate in your name." I smiled. "Thank you, Hal." "She left pretty fast after that," he added. It was becoming clear. Every time Elaine tried to twist the story, it backfired. People weren't just hearing my side, they were seeing it, reinforced by facts and her own behavior. She was losing ground, and for someone like her, that was worse than losing the ring. But I knew the real breaking point was still ahead. It happened at a family friend's anniversary party. One of those events where half the town seemed to show up, dressed just a little too nicely for a backyard gathering. I hadn't planned on going, but Daniel insisted it would be good to show our faces. I suspected he was worried about the tension with his mother becoming too obvious. The second we walked in, I spotted Elaine. She was standing near the refreshment table, holding court with 3 other women, laughing just a little too loudly. Her eyes landed on me almost immediately, and I saw it. The sharp calculation, like a predator deciding whether to pounce. I knew something was coming. For the first hour, I kept my distance, chatting with old friends, making polite conversation. I wore the ring, of course. It caught the evening light perfectly, throwing tiny sparks when I lifted my hand. And then it happened. I was talking to Emily and Megan near the drinks table when Elaine approached, her heels clicking like a metronome. She smiled sweetly, but there was steel in her voice. "Darling," she said, "I think we should clear something up for everyone here." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" She turned slightly, raising her voice just enough for the nearby group to hear. "There's been a lot of talk lately, rumors really, about this ring you're wearing. And I'd hate for anyone to get the wrong impression about what happened." Emily's expression tightened, but she stayed quiet. Elaine went on. "The truth is, she asked me to handle it while she was in the hospital. She didn't say it outright, but I assumed she wanted me to sell it to help with expenses. There was never any theft." She gave a little laugh, as if the idea were absurd. I let the silence hang for a moment, long enough for a few more heads to turn toward us. Then I spoke, my voice calm, even warm. That's interesting, Elaine. Because Hal still has the certificate in my name with my grandmother's handwriting on it. And because when you took it in for appraisal, you gave your maiden name, Jenkins, not mine. Almost like you didn't want anyone to connect it back to me. A flicker of panic crossed her face before she smoothed it over. Well, I continued, you told me yourself it wasn't worth much after you sold it. That's odd, considering Hal says you almost fainted when you heard it was worth over $60,000. The small crowd that had gathered murmured quietly. Elaine's mouth tightened. You're twisting. No, I said softly, cutting her off. I'm stating facts, and I haven't once lied about any of them. You're welcome to explain why you didn't mention the value, why you didn't tell Daniel, and why you acted without asking me. Go ahead, I'm listening. The murmuring grew louder. Someone near the back whispered, She's got her dead to rights. Elaine's eyes darted around, realizing this wasn't going the way she'd planned. Her voice wavered. I was trying to help. By taking something priceless from me while I was recovering from surgery? I asked, still keeping my tone low, almost conversational. That's not help, Elaine. That's control. And the worst part is, you thought I wouldn't fight back. The air was thick now, everyone watching her. She looked around again, searching for an ally, but no one stepped forward. Even Daniel, standing just behind me, stayed silent. Finally, she muttered something about not needing to stand here and be humiliated, and walked quickly toward the exit. Her shoulders were stiff, her chin high, but I could see the tremor in her step. As the door closed behind her, Megan leaned in and whispered, That wasn't just a scene. That was the funeral for her reputation. I didn't smile, but I felt the truth of it. Elaine had tried to take the fight public, and she'd lost. Publicly. And for someone like her, that was a deeper cut than anything I could have done behind closed doors. But I also knew she wasn't finished. People like Elaine didn't disappear quietly. If she came back, it wouldn't be with gossip. It would be with something sharper, and I was already planning for that. Elaine vanished after the anniversary party. No calls, no texts, no unexpected visits. For 2 full weeks, there was nothing. Daniel thought maybe she was embarrassed enough to stay away for good. But I knew better. Elaine wasn't the type to lick her wounds in silence. She was the type to wait until she thought the moment was right, then strike where it hurt most. That moment came on a rainy Thursday evening. Daniel was working late, and I was folding laundry when my phone buzzed with a message from Megan. Heads up. Elaine's at your mom's house. My chest tightened. My mother had stayed out of this mess from the start. She wasn't confrontational and didn't want to get in the middle of family politics, which made her the perfect target for Elaine. Someone she could corner without witnesses. I didn't think. I just grabbed my keys and drove. When I pulled up, Elaine's car was in the driveway. The rain slicked the windshield as I sat there for a moment, watching the light spilling from my mother's living room window. I could see their silhouettes. Elaine sitting upright, my mother leaning back, hands in her lap. I walked in without knocking. Elaine turned sharply, her smile tight. Oh, what a surprise. Not really, I said, hanging my coat. Megan texted me. My mother looked between us nervously. We were just talking. No, I said gently, moving to stand beside her. Elaine was talking, and I'm guessing it was about me. Elaine straightened. I was explaining the situation from my perspective. Your mother deserves to hear both sides. My mother already knows the truth, I said, my voice steady. What you're doing is trying to rewrite history so you don't look like the villain. Elaine's eyes flashed. You've poisoned everyone against me. Even Daniel's starting to doubt. Daniel's starting to see, I interrupted. That's different. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. Inside were copies of the appraisal, the certificate, and a printed transcript of Hal's statement confirming the sequence of events. I set it on the coffee table. Since you like to tell people your side, I said, I thought you might appreciate a reminder of the actual facts. You took my property without permission. You misrepresented its value. You tried to sell it under your maiden name. And when you were caught, you lied to everyone, including my husband. Elaine's face was pale now, but I wasn't finished. Here's the thing, Elaine. I'm done reacting to you. From now on, if you so much as imply another lie about me to family or friends, I'll make sure everyone sees these documents. And I'll include the note Hal wrote about the collector who offered $65,000 on the spot. It will be the only story anyone remembers about you. My mother said nothing, but I could feel her watching closely, really seeing me take control for the first time. Elaine's voice shook. You're threatening me. I'm promising you consequences, I said quietly. You can choose to stop now, walk away, and this doesn't have to get worse. For a long moment, she just sat there, staring at me. I could almost see the war in her head, pride against self-preservation. Finally, she stood. This isn't over, she muttered. Yes, it is, I said, meeting her gaze. Because the next move you make against me will be your last in this family. She grabbed her purse and walked out, the door closing behind her with a sharp click. I sat down beside my mother, my pulse still racing. You handled that well, she said softly. I didn't handle it for her, I replied. I handled it for me. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt the ground under my feet was solid again. The weeks after that rainy Thursday felt different. The air in the family shifted, like the weather after a long, oppressive storm. Elaine wasn't gone. People like her never truly disappear. But she was quieter, smaller somehow. She didn't show up uninvited anymore. No more early morning calls to Daniel with urgent opinions about our lives. At family gatherings, she kept her distance, her comments clipped and polite. And every time our eyes met, I saw the memory of that night in my mother's living room flicker there. A reminder that the rules had changed. The gossip didn't vanish. If anything, it became part of her shadow. At barbecues, birthdays, and weddings, someone would inevitably glance at my hand, see the ring glinting in the light, and lean toward a friend to whisper. It wasn't malicious anymore. It was just part of her story now, something she'd never outrun. And that was exactly how I wanted it. Daniel noticed the change too. It's like she's different, he said one evening as we were putting away dishes. More careful. She knows the boundaries now, I said simply. He hesitated, then added, I guess I didn't realize how much I let her get away with. I glanced at him. You didn't want to see it, but now you do. One Saturday afternoon, we hosted a small dinner, just a few close friends and family. Elaine came, of course, but she arrived on time, brought a bottle of wine, and, most shocking of all, waited to be invited in. When dessert was served, Megan leaned over to me and whispered, You've tamed the dragon. I smiled faintly. No, I just built a wall she can't climb. Later, as people were saying their goodbyes, Elaine approached me in the kitchen. She glanced at the ring on my finger, then at me. It's a beautiful piece, she said quietly. It always was, I replied. There was a pause. For a second, I thought she might actually apologize. But that wasn't Elaine. Instead, she gave a short nod and walked out to the car. I stood there for a moment, my fingers brushing the smooth band. The diamond caught the light, scattering it across the countertop. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry anymore. It was a reminder of the line I'd drawn, the fight I hadn't backed down from, the control I'd reclaimed. Because the truth was, this had never been just about a ring. It had been about years of small invasions, constant undermining, and the belief that I'd always choose peace over confrontation. They were wrong. The ring was back where it belonged, and so was my voice.